For those of you that know me well, you know that baseball is not really a sport of mine. But I have recently been following someone who's my guest today who is posting lots of content about catching. And ever since watching his content, I literally want to go back to my childhood and become a catcher. So that must mean that he's doing something right. There's like 30,000 plus people following this guy, and he's a lot more than just a catching coach. And you're going to hear that today. But I will waste no more time. Anj Bourgeois, I think I said that right. Welcome to the show.
Bingo. That was a great intro, man. That was a great intro.
Well, I only practiced like 100 times. No, but dude, thanks for joining me. Of course, guys, you're getting tired of hearing this. This is another person that I've met from LinkedIn. LinkedIn has changed my life because I get to meet people like Anj. One thing that he and I talk about a lot is right now we're 25, 26-ish years old, young in our careers. But we love networking with each other and other people our age. One, just because it's fun to make friends and build relationships, but also in 10, 15, 20 years, people our age will be the business owners and the leaders in the world. And I've been told advice from older people that you'll be surprised when all of those relationships start coming around. And so, who knows where this goes? Hopefully in 20 years, we can look back on this and be like, oh my gosh, look where the Lord has led all of this. But that's kind of a little bit of how our relationship is formed. He's helped me a ton with this new TikTok venture I'm on, which for those of you following me, I'm trying to figure it out along the way. And honestly, at this point, I'm just rambling because I just finished a Celsius and I'm just on one right now. So I'm going to stop talking. Anj Bourgeois, where did the name Anj come from? I know you got a story behind that.
I do have a story. So basically, here's the short story, and then I may add in some other details too. But so when my mom was pregnant with me, my dad had one of his best friends who was named Anj. And my parents lived in Utah. And so my dad worked with Anj. Anj is going to go propose to his girlfriend, goes and drives to California. And as they're on their way, his brother's driving, falls asleep at the wheel, rolls the car, Anj dies, his brother lives. And so super like tragic moment, but had a really profound impact on my dad. Was a really great friend, great golfer. And so we went, so my parents decided to name me Andrew Jason, because Jason is my dad's name. So Andrew Jason, but they chose Anj beforehand. So they chose Anj as my nickname, want to give me a real name as like a legal name because Anj can be confusing. And so that's how I got Anj Bourgeois.
Wow. Andrew Jason. And that, I mean, that really is a tragic story. But it's cool that that's where your name comes from, and this guy's legacy lives on. So Anj is a great name. That's always a great conversation starter. But you're from Irvine, California, right? You grew up in California?
So grew up in Salt Lake City, California, and
Salt Lake City, California?
Whoa, my bad. Salt Lake City, Utah. Came out to California for college. I played baseball at Biola University, which is in La Mirada. So still Southern California. Met my wife there, Bailey. After we got married, we moved back to Salt Lake City, and I was a youth pastor at the church that I'd grown up at. We were there for 9 months and then decided to come back to California. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I wanted to play baseball my whole life. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll go be a pastor. And I'm like, well, I'm not being a pastor anymore. Maybe I don't know. And so then I was like, well, I don't know. Financial planning sounds cool. You know, you get to sit down with people, and it's like a really intimate trust building moment because, you know, it can be really personal, and get to figure out what their goals and dreams are and be creative in the way that they allocate money. And hey, it's not even your money. Like, it's the money that God's given you. How do we best use this? So got a job doing, being a paraplanner, which is like on your way to becoming a CFP and financial planner. Literally move out to California, unload our furniture from the U-Haul. And the next day, after all the stuff is unloaded, get an email from the CEO saying, hey, COVID, sorry, we're not sure what's going on. Like, we're going to have to gonna have to pause. And so I was like, oh my gosh. Looking back, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I would have died in that job. My soul would have shrunk, because I'm a creative person. I want to build, I want to innovate, I want to do things. And in the financial industry, that is not looked highly upon per se. So but we needed proof of insurance or proof of income in order to get a place. So that was like a huge thing that I got the offer, and then it was taken away when we got there. So like looking back, it's like, well, okay, I see there's a plan. So then after that, then I got into some digital marketing at like a little startup, and kind of wet my feet in the digital space. There's no way I would have gotten into that if not for that experience of losing the job opportunity. This was the only opening. It was COVID. Everything was madness. Because I was not really a tech guy, not a digital person. I'm a people person, man. Like, not a tech guy. So got my feet wet there. Then moved into sales. Did sales for a year, selling shipping services like UPS and freight services. Then went over to Cintas and sold toilet paper, paper towels, floor mats. Did that for, I want to say, like 6 months or so. And then I sent a life-changing DM to someone on LinkedIn. And that's how I'm at Impact right now. So,
Wow. That's a great story. And it's just cool to think that you showed up to California and job didn't work out, but you had proof of income, proof of employment, just so you can live there. And then it's all worked out since then. And even just how me as someone else that has been like, oh, I'm a people person, which my job still is, but I'm selling a technology. I'm doing a lot of stuff over Zoom. So it's just cool how you've even kind of learned what you're passionate about, I guess. So when you say life-changing DM, I feel like I'm being led to ask about this life-changing DM.
So essentially, when I was at Cintas, I was in outside sales, right? I had an awesome job, man. I had the Newport Beach territory. I didn't have my own territory yet because I was still like in training or whatever. Then I was like out of training, but there weren't any open territories. But I had Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Laguna Beach, like the coolest territory that you could imagine. And they're paying for my car, they're paying for my gas. And are you there? My screen just froze.
Oh yeah, I'm here. You can keep going. Just keep going, even if it like goes dark. It'll load later. I should have told you that before that.
So I have this awesome job, but I'm going door to door, and I'm like, I don't know how effective this is. Like, I feel like this could be done much more efficiently. Like, this seems like a model from a long time ago. And then I actually got called in for jury duty. And I don't know what this case was still to this day. It must have been some intense, maybe murder case or something. But get called in for jury duty, and the case is for 2 months. And it's like Monday through Thursday, 9 to 4:30. And I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. I'm in sales. Like, my income is directly tied to my activity. And so I told the judge, I was like, hey, I'm in sales. Like, I'm young. Like, been married for 2 years. I need to work. And she's like, you'll figure it out. And I was like, oh, okay. So luckily the case got pushed due to some of the people getting COVID, which is unfortunate, but fortunate for me because I was able to go work. But it made me think, and I was like, man, what would I have to do if those were the constraints, right? And constraints drive innovation, constraints drive decision making. So I was like, if I did have those constraints, what would I need to do? And I was like, well, I'd need to do things through the internet, and then I need to stack my Fridays up and close all of them. That's what would need to happen. And so I was like, well, how would I do that? Well, I don't know. Let me do some research. Found this guy named Tom Ferry, who is a real estate coach. Talks a lot about making videos on YouTube, doing a bunch of stuff, creating content around the questions that people are asking. And then another dude that I met through LinkedIn, he posted a picture of a book called They Ask You Answer. And So I read this thing and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the playbook. This is literally exactly how you would do it, especially in an industry that there's low trust, which the facility services uniform industry, there's low trust. And I'm like, wow, this is genius. And then at the same time, I was also reading this book called Play Bigger by Christopher Lochhead and some other guys. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. So read Play Bigger, started learning about category design. Was also listening to Chris Walker on, gosh, I forget what his podcast. He just changed it to Revenue Vitals. But so I was I like came across They Ask You Answer. I'd already been reading and listening to this stuff, and my mind was just blown. And so I literally just created this video because I said, I have to get this stuff out of my head because this is it, man. Like, this is like the future of sales. And so I made this video presentation on Canva and recorded it. I was sick at the time and I have asthma, so I'm like coughing through the whole video, and I just sent it to a few of my friends. And so, anyways, a month later, I sent it to one of my mentors, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna send it to Marcus, the author of They Ask You Answer. Like, a lot of times I see authors post like, hey, these are the types of messages that make it all worth it. And so I send it to him. I said, hey, I made a video of you, Chris Walker, and Christopher Lochhead. It's about 10 minutes, but I think that you might really enjoy it. I work at Cintas. I think that we should be doing assignment selling and like writing big five type of content, which are like some They Ask You Answer terms. So it showed that I knew his stuff. And I was like, either way, thought I'd send it over. Hope that you have a great day. And he responds back and is like, hey, why are you working there? Why are you not working with me? Would you be open to talking? And so I was like, heck yeah, I'd be open to talking. And so life-changing DM, man. I have been there. I've learned so much. The people that I work with are incredible. And I get to help people build trust in their industry through answering the questions that customers ask. So pretty cool, man.
Golly, that really is a life-changing DM. So often we really are one message away from really changing the trajectory of our career or our lives. And I even one message I think that would be good to share here to listeners, especially people younger, maybe in their 20s, is Anj saw a problem with his job and said, how can I fix that? How can I be innovative? How can I be different? And something I've been learning a lot about, I think, with our generation of being on the back end of millennials, some people in the Gen Z, is that like there are a lot of older ways of doing work.
Mm-hmm.
And while I think we have an enormous amount to learn from some of these older generations, I do think that we have these innovative minds that have grown up with technology that see the world differently and think that there's better ways. And like you did that. And now it changed your career and it changed your life. And I'm sure that's led to some of the stuff you're doing on TikTok and all that. I don't want to get too much into it, but what's the job? I mean, what's the rest of the story? What are you doing now?
Yeah, dude. So it's cool. So I came in as a content trainer. So essentially how it works, right? Are you familiar with like EOS or scaling up or anything like that? Cool. So it's very similar to that, but it's for sales and marketing coaching. And so, one of the problems that we often see is that people outsource their marketing to agencies, which leads to a few major problems, right? One being that, the voice of the company is not truly reflected. It's just some agency who doesn't really have the subject matter expertise to be talking on it. They're just Googling stuff and coming up with stuff, right? And then two, they don't have control over like what is really being published. Like they don't have like an internal content team that's able to ramp up, ramp down, pivot, change focus. And so their content engine per se is not that strong, which, as we're aware, right, content is king right now. And that's how businesses are growing and dying, depending on how well they're using content. So and then the other thing, oftentimes they pay way more for way less when they outsource their agency. So we train companies to do sales and marketing in-house so that you aren't dependent on an agency, that you have control over your destiny. And one of the ways that we do that, or I mean, we do it a lot of ways, but we have a mastery program. It's very similar to like an EOS or scaling up. So you have a head coach who oversees the entire company. We'll start with like a kickoff, like a 3-hour planning period session. And then from there, we'll set priorities, and then we'll break out with trainers the main things that we need to work on. So typically within the first 90 days, we're hiring a content manager who's going to write written content for blog articles. And then we're going to hire a videographer who's going to who's going to create video content. And then also, hopefully there's a HubSpot admin, and then we'll work with your sales team. And so you get like the head coach overseeing the account, then you got those 4 kind of trainers that are overseeing those 4 key components of the sales and marketing initiative. And then we work to oversee it from a high level, and then work one-on-one or in group settings with like the content manager and the videographer, and train them up on the skills that they need in order to turn this content engine on and answer the questions that customers are asking. So that's essentially how it works.
I love that. I love that. And I think that what you said is people that are outsourcing their marketing, maybe it's like a quick fix, but there's a lot of problems that can come up from there. And I feel like you're saving people money, a lot of money in the long term, because if you're training them how to think strategically about their marketing, they can, once they learn from you, they can probably then take that and then build upon it from there. So it sounds like you're solving a great problem. I love to hear it. Now, I got to hear the story about TikTok. I mean, you're talking about catching, you got 30,000 plus people following you. I have no idea when you started or how you got rolling with that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, man, where to start? So I've wanted to do this for a long time. I I I transitioned to a catcher my junior year of college. So I don't know how much you know about baseball, how much you know about catching, but that is extremely late. Extremely late.
That's what I heard. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I was crazy enough to do it, which was also crazy. But yeah, so I transitioned my junior year of college. Had caught like maybe a few bullpens before, but throughout that process, I learned so much, and I learned it literally from the ground level up. And I love to teach. And so I know how to teach the position really, really well. And I learned so much throughout my time. There's so many life lessons that I learned playing at Biola. I had some awesome coaches. So I've wanted to do this for a while. I've had all these content ideas on my head. I love posting on LinkedIn. I'd been practicing posting on LinkedIn for maybe 2 years before this TikTok opportunity came around. And so, a lot of it is like preparing yourself so that when the opportunity comes, you can take it. Because a lot of times, once the opportunity is there, then you're not ready for it. And then what happens, right? But I had known how to make content. I had known how to like what resonates, what doesn't, how do you write a good hook. I'd been practicing that stuff for a while. And then I also was looking at, hey, how does they ask you answer apply in the social space? But I needed to focus on figuring out the content space first. And so I got switched teams, and the new head of my team, Chris Dupre, awesome dude, absolutely love this guy. He told me, he was like, hey, no more LinkedIn. You need to focus on getting really good at your job, because at that point I wasn't. And I like really didn't like that, but it was exactly what I needed in order to perform my job at a high level, was like just the blinders on. But at the same time, I was like, knowing again, like I was about to have a baby, and I'm like, no, I know that content is going to help me, and I need to keep creating content in order to keep advancing in my career and keep learning. Like, this seems like a really big opportunity. I'm really curious about it. I think there's a reason that I'm curious about it. And so like, okay. And then at the same time, one of my good buddies, he was a groomsman in my wedding. I was a groomsman at his wedding. He was posting baseball content. And he kind of got big because I don't know if you ever saw this, but he was a free agent signed by the Nationals, and he goes and tells his dad, and his dad starts crying, and he's like, "I'm so proud of you," and it like blew up. He was like National Person of the Week on Good Morning America, and like Juan
Man.
Soto, the right fielder for the Nationals at the time, like reposted it on the thing. It was like, "Hey, welcome to the team." So like super cool. And then he got released, and he started making baseball content, and he was getting a bunch of catching questions, and he was like, "Hey, there's a bunch of people asking catching questions on my stuff. Like, let me give you a camera and teach you how to edit, and then you can start making stuff." So he helped me make my first video, and then I had all the systems knowledge and content ideas already. And so then it was just off to the races, man. Once he showed me that, my second video got like 1.3 million views. I
Whew.
went to 10,000 followers in a week, and yeah, now I'm at like over 30,000. I think I'm at like 12 or something on Instagram now. But it's been so cool, dude. It's been so cool to learn. And one other thing too, and you probably have some follow up questions based on that story, but this is probably the coolest part. I connected with a dad and a son in Louisiana, and he told me, we hopped on a Zoom call, and he told me, "I watch your videos with my son every night before bed." And I just kind of took a step back, and I was like, wow, what a connection point for a father and a son through something that they love, baseball, catching, in a way that I can help educate and guide in the skill development of catching, but also teach the principles about life. Like, come on. Like, that's what makes my heart light on fire. And one of my other mentors, he tells me, hearts on fire, get stuff done. And
Mm.
that absolutely lights my heart on fire. So I'm like, dude, that fires me up. And so, yeah, we can go into a lot more, but I'll let you take it where you want to go from here.
Dude, hearts on fire, get stuff done. I mean, I even have chills thinking about that because it's a win-win for everyone because you love catching, you're
Yep.
having fun doing it. And guys, social media can be a horrible thing, but it can also be a life-changing, incredible, fruitful thing depending on how one you're if you're creating content, what content that you're creating and the goal that you have, but then also as a consumer, you have the choice to decide what you're looking at. So maybe you don't care about catching, maybe you don't care about baseball. I don't care about either, yet I still follow Anj, and now I think I do care about it. But like, I just think it's really cool that you're saying, hey, I am trying to create some good, and yeah, you're helping people become better catchers. But I just bet that kid and his dad, their relationship is growing through you, which is super cool. I've got chills thinking about that story. Oh man, that's awesome. Now, okay, it says something about you that your junior year of college, you were like, sure, I'll pick up catching. I mean, I, I feel like someone that's played a sport for their whole life that's been really passionate about it that hasn't done that, there's probably a level at that point, especially as a college athlete, to have maybe a level of entitlement or like there are 8 other positions that I actually could probably pick up faster than this one, yet you did it. I mean, I think your willingness to show up. I mean, did the team like need somebody to step in? How did that happen?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. So there is a push and a pull, both of them, which I think is important to know. Like whenever there's a big decision, to see it, feel if there's a push and a pull. Oftentimes you want both, because that's when it's going to be easiest to go. But so yeah, great question. So the only reason that I did it was because my coach asked me to, and he called me one day. I remember I was in Ohio playing summer ball, literally the day before. Kid you not, the day before, or something like that. It was like right before. It feels like the day before. It could have been a few days or whatever, but it's like 95 degrees, 80% humidity in Ohio, just awful. And I see our catchers just getting absolutely beat up behind the plate. They're running, they're completely dripped in sweat, and they're going to do blocking drills. And I remember looking at them and telling one of my teammates, wow, you really got to be a different type of person if you want to catch. And right,
Wow.
the ultimate foreshadow, right? And so the next day or whatever it was, I'm in the gym working out with my teammates, and I get a call from my coach right after I had finished. I was doing abs and stretching, and he's like, "Hey, I got a question for you." I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I don't need an answer from you right now. You can take some time to pray about it, think about it, but would you be open to learning to catch?" And he lays out, he's like, "Look, it's really difficult transition. There's very high chance that you could get caught in the middle and not really playing. The skill sets transfer well, right? Quick feet, quick hands, good head on your shoulders, leadership abilities, but it's a completely different position. You're not going to be catching ground balls. You're going to be in a squat, blocking balls on your knees, like very different skill sets." And he was like, "But I wouldn't ask anyone else to do this." He said, "Your work ethic and your attention to detail are the two reasons that I think that you could actually do it." So I was like, "All right, well, let me think about it." Now that's kind of the pull. The push was also I wanted to go play professionally, and I ran like a 7.260. So in baseball, if you're playing middle infield and you're not running below a 7, you're not going to go play on. And so I was aware of that. We also had another transfer come in from the University of Utah who was a bounce back transfer who was super good. So then we had four really good infielders at third, short, and second in 3 spots. And and so I was aware of all those things, and I was like, you know what? If I move to catch, right, I think my greatest strength, which is my ability to communicate and lead and connect with a pitching staff, is actually enhanced. And I think my greatest weakness, which is my speed, actually kind of flips and becomes a weapon. Because if I can run a 7.2 as a catcher, like, hey, that's actually not too bad. Um,
Yeah.
and so it was like all of those factors combined were, the reason that I was like, well, you know what, I think this might be a good idea. And so I was like, all right, well, let's go. So I started stretching, I started reading, I started finding all the information that I could, and just getting after it. So I only caught for 18 months in total, and had some major ups and downs, but it was an awesome ride.
Man, that's a great story. And I think that it's just so impressive for you to see an opportunity and yeah, there's some risk, but then take a chance and go for it and do it. And y'all, Ange said, so I started stretching and reading and studying and researching. If you can be an aggressive learner, especially
Mm-hmm.
as someone in their 20s that's typically entitled because maybe you've been around your parents or everything's been handed to you. And I'm not calling on it out. That was me until recently. But like, if you can say, I'm going to learn and dive in, then the opportunities, the floodgates are going to open. And you don't even have to be like elite at whatever it is that you're doing. It's just the fact that most other people aren't aggressively learning. They're coasting and drifting, which is the point of this podcast, because I don't want you to do that. So I mean, we can talk more about catching a little bit if you want. Off the cuff, you've mentioned a few times that there's some life lessons that you've learned from catching. I don't want to majorly put you on the spot here, but if anything comes to mind, I'd love to hear some of those.
No, this is great, man. This is who I am, bro. This is who I am. So, yeah, so many life lessons. The biggest one, and I think I will write a book on this someday or do a podcast on this someday, but called Simple But Hard, because through that, through catching, I remember I was sitting back there, and I developed a lot of like frameworks and like, how do I think about this that is cool now, because now I can share it. And that's like a lot of my content of like, what's the goal of receiving? What's the goal of throwing? What's the goal of blocking? What does a good catching stance look like? What's the goal of it? And so how I came up with it is the goal of receiving is to catch the ball in one fluid motion back to the zone. And I know this isn't directly answering your question, but hopefully this will help some people with how they think too. Do you know what the inversion principle is?
Not really. I think I've heard of it, but I don't know.
Okay, so the inversion principle is like one of my very favorite things. I was first exposed to it through this guy named Jason Selk, who was a mental performance coach for the Cardinals. But apparently, Charlie Munger, like Warren Buffett's number two guy, is the guy who popularized this. But the idea is it's easier to think about what makes something go bad than makes something go good. And so you can literally use this for anything, especially when it comes to making decisions. But so like for receiving, for example, if you use the inversion principle, you're like, okay, what's the thing that would screw everything up when I receive? Well, I would want to make strikes look like balls, catch it away from the zone. I'd want to catch it away from my body. I'd want to make it look jerky. And I'd want to be late. Right? So then it's like, okay, well, if you just flip that, it's going to give you a really good idea of what good looks like. Well, I should probably catch it back to the zone, not jerky, but fluid, not late, but getting there early. And you can literally just take the wrong thing and just flip it. And it's gonna push you within 90% accuracy of what the right thing is. And so hopefully all you guys can use that, whether it's, what would a good girlfriend or spouse look like? Well, let's think about what a bad one would look like, and then let's just flip it around, and that'll generally point you in the right direction. Job, sales prospect, whatever. But so all that stuff. So the idea of simple but hard came to me when I kind of figured out this framework of like, okay, you got to catch it back to the zone in one fluid motion. And I'm sitting back there behind the plate, and I'm like, very simple concept. And these guys are throwing 92 with sink, and I'm just like, just catching balls down, away from the zone, late, stabby, clunking off my glove. And I'm like, gosh, this is so hard. And I'm like, but it's so simple. And I was like, oh, simple but hard. And through that, I just got really passionate about the fundamentals because like I just learned that, I'm doing the same drills as Yadier Molina, one of the best catchers of all time, is doing, who's also doing the same drills as an 8-year-old catcher. But the difference is not in the drill that we're doing, it's in how well we do the drill. And so I just got really passionate about the fundamentals, and that transferred over into my life and my faith. And I was like, you know what? I'm really not truly reading my Bible every day. I was like, if I really want to follow Jesus, then like, I need to be in his word and I need to be talking to him. And I was like, wow, that's, every single person who is a Christian would say, oh yeah, you should read your Bible and pray. But again, how often do we actually do it? Very simple, very hard to do consistently well. And so that's a big thing. And then another thing is, I think the most important thing, especially for young catchers, is a good stance. And so if you watch my videos, so much of it talks about the stance, because you can't move on to the more advanced things until you're in a good stance. Mm-hmm. And that's where so many of us go wrong, is we think we're more advanced than we are, so we don't do the fundamentals well, when really the only way to get to the advanced levels is to do the fundamentals well for a really, really long period of time. So then one more thing on this. One thing that I really love, probably one of my favorite passages in the Bible, is the Sermon on the Mount. That's probably my very, very favorite one. My coach would always say, hey, this is the first time Jesus speaks publicly. Do you think he was intentional about what he said? And at the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, he finishes and he says, all right, everyone hears these words of mine. There's a guy who builds on the rock, and there's a guy who builds on the sand. And he says, the guy who builds on the rock is the one who hears it and does it. The guy who builds it on the sand is the one who hears it and doesn't do it. And then when the storms come and the rains flood, you will see whether your house stands or falls. And it's one of the most famous stories, but also one of the most misinterpreted, because what people think is if you hear it, it's on the rock. If you don't hear it, it's on the sand. But if you actually listen to the story, then it says both hear it, one does, one doesn't do. And that was just so true for me in my catching life that I like hung on to that thing, because the storms come when you're catching, man. Like, guys are throwing really fast balls and you have to block them. And if your foundation is not rock solid, you will literally get exposed and you have to go run to the backstop to go pick up the ball. And so I got really passionate about, like, okay, how do I build on a firm foundation in this? Because that's the only way that I'm going to make it. So yeah, so many lessons, man. We could talk for another 2 hours just on those stories, but I'll shut up and let you go.
Dude, I'm like misty eyed over here as we're making analogies to catching in life and following Jesus, if that's something that you do. I mean, you've had to have think about those before, and I'm so glad that I asked, because it's so important. And I even just think about some of your videos. You've got 8-year-olds that are in there, and I know that you're able to teach them that from an early age. The simple but hard, so good. I think it makes me think about, there's a book behind me called Grit, and the author Angela Duckworth talks about deliberate practice. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
might be doing the same thing as the best catcher of all time, the same drill, but how deliberately are you doing it? Like, is it perfect practice?
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that that's one of the things that I got from you there. And then just your stance, like your foundation is so important. And guys, that's why I have this podcast. If you're in your 20s, you don't have to be in your 20s, but you have so much more of your life to live. We may feel like adults because maybe you went to college and you graduated college and you have your first job and you're making money, but we don't know anything. And well, I don't want to discredit us, because I do think there is a lot of wisdom and things that we have, but like, how can we learn and build a foundation right now for when maybe you have kids one day and you go through hardships with them? Maybe you lose a job. Maybe you go through a major recession and storms come. So how can we prepare right now? And just because you've heard something, like as we said on the Sermon on the Mount, doesn't mean it's fallen on solid ground. It could be on the sand. It's like your parents, just because your parents taught you to be a good character, or if you grew up in a Christian household, taught you the Bible stories, that means nothing. And I can say that with confidence because that's my story. It's like my parents gave me all the head knowledge. I learned it from school. I learned it at church. It wasn't in my heart till later on, and my life looked completely different. So how do we get there from catching? That's amazing. And that's why I wanted to have you on here, because these are just amazing principles. I normally try to keep these around 30 minutes and we're over, but I still have a few couple quick hitters to ask you about, just for a couple more things to add here at the end. One of the things that you mentioned before me, older people will help you. That's something that you
Yes.
told me. What was your mindset there?
Oh, I was hoping you would bring this up. So this is something that I realized quickly once I was on LinkedIn. Dude, I'm telling you, LinkedIn is, and this may change in a few years. Maybe someone listens to this a few years from now. But LinkedIn is so special because it's people who are in the business world, right? Like the intention is to teach and to give. It's not necessarily like the other social media platforms, because it's more business oriented. But one thing that I noticed is that these older people, they want to help the young guns. They genuinely want to help the young guns. And this was made so apparent to me. So there was this one guy, his name's Dustin. He's a CEO of an escrow company in Irvine. And when I was selling UPS shipping stuff, I found him. He went to Biola. I followed up with him 12, 15 times, left him so many voicemails. And I was just determined, I'm going to talk to you. Like, there's no way where you're not going to talk to me. And we have a meeting, and he's like, look, I'm not switching to UPS. You know why I took the meeting? And I was like, no, why? And he's like, because you went to my school, and I want to help you out, and you followed up with me so many times that I figured that you might be worth paying attention to. And
Mm.
and through that, dude, we've built this awesome relationship. And I also connected with some other people on LinkedIn, and the older people, like, that have been successful in business, they've already done their thing. They've made their money. They've built their businesses. They've they've done their thing. They've achieved a lot of the things that they want to achieve. And so the next thing that they want to achieve is they want to pass on what they've learned. And when I learned this, I was like, whoa, these guys genuinely want to help. Like, I can go to them and they will help shortcut my path with the wisdom that they have if I just ask them. And that, like, as again, simple but hard, but like as simple as that is, if you actually do that, you shortcut so many painful lessons that you would have to learn, and you get connected to these other people who have resources that you don't have when you're young. So that has been cool. And then I guess one other thing on that, there's been this guy who I get coffee with every Sunday morning at Starbucks. We call it our Bucks because it's ours. And he has just like walked with me slowly for the past year, working on things, talking through life, helping me create systems in my life. And that has been probably the greatest gift of this year. I'm also having a baby, so that's up there too. But that has been truly life-changing to have an older person in my life speaking into it, giving me wisdom, helping me figure these things out. And again, he does it because he wants to invest in me. And I think there's a lot of people that have this belief that the older generation doesn't want to invest in them, and it's like cutting the legs off of their development, where if they did believe that, then they would go have these relationships that would really help.
Dude, that's awesome. I'm so glad you have those relationships, and older people really do want to help. Not every single one of them. Also, like, we are not entitled to their time or their wisdom. I do think there's certain things like following up a certain amount of times, or showing up on time, or thanking them, or genuinely listening and paying attention, that's going to say, okay, the way I'm spending my time is worth it. So you can't just roll up and, be entitled to somebody's time that's really valuable. But I have found that as well, that people do really care. And also, I think the best leaders, the people who are the wisest, I've learned this from Tim Elmore, who's in his 60s now, I believe. I had him on this podcast, but he talks about how people our age, we actually have timely wisdom. I think that's what he calls it. So that might be
interesting.
You're working at Cintas, and you have an innovative idea for how to sell that could be relevant to someone older. So let's not cut ourselves short. Us younger folks that have grown up with technology, that think differently, that have innovative ideas, we have timely ideas. But never underestimate timeless principles, timeless characteristics that you will probably only learn from a mentor or an older person because they've lived it. Mm-hmm. And I do think that we might know some of these answers, but we haven't lived them. We haven't lived through super hard things. We haven't raised children. And there's just certain things that we can't learn, that you really can't shortcut and bypass if you really lean in and listen and want to learn from these people. So great prompt to find some older people and really learn from them as well. And then I think the way that I can end us, unless there's anything else you wanted to add, when we were talking before, you mentioned something about, or when you texted me, of like who you want to be or who you want to become. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me just touch on that. I know we're over, so I'll try to keep it short. But so as we were talking before this, sending each other some voice memos, I was like, okay, if this is like an open memoir to my 22-year-old self or whatever, I would just push really hard in terms of, okay, who are the people that you aspire to be like? Just try to go figure out how to be around them. And if you can do that, then you're going to pick up on the character traits, the way that they think. You're going to pick up just from simply being around them a ton of stuff that's going to shortcut your path to success in whatever you want to do. And so it's both in character and in like the thing that you want to do. A lot of times we'll just take a job because that's the best job available. And sometimes that can be great. But if you do have an idea of, man, I would love to do that, do whatever you got to do to go knock down the doors to go find that person and sweep the floors if you have to get in. And I'm telling you, man, they'll want to help you if you show that you are a valuable person to invest in, right? You're right. You can't just take. You want to give value, but if you find that person, go figure out how to add value to that person. It might be the timely wisdom of social media or something like that, but go find that person and figure out how to get around them. That that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice.
That's wonderful advice. For the exception of people that were handed a business or had some sort of fortune, which nothing against them. Many people that you find are really successful oftentimes have that story of their teens or their early 20s of, I said I would sweep the floor. I would do anything. I'd work for free. I just want to learn. I just want to be around you.
Mm-hmm.
That oftentimes people have that story of this level of grit and interest. So I just think if you can say, this is who I want to become, and like I am just going to make myself available to learn. Older people, so we are wired to multiply and to develop other people. And whether you're a Christian or not, like the Bible says, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. Of course, that's talking about like your own offspring, but I also think that we have the desire to develop other people.
Yeah.
And whether you're a person of faith or not, people want to leave an impact and a legacy. And so if you can say, look, I'll work for free, I'll scrub the floors, whatever it takes, I want to learn. Maybe you get a few no's, but you're going to get yeses at some point. So just be available for that whole situation. So to end us here, where can people find you? What is it? Catching Made Simple?
Catching Made Simple is my handle. That is correct.
Oh, I love it. I'll link that below, guys.
Hey,
Whether you know anything about baseball or not. Go
can I
ahead.
say
Sorry.
one more thing too?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I know we're way over, man. But another thing that I'm so convicted on is that skills compound. And so I've heard Alex Hormozy talk about this a lot, but like it's really interesting even as I look back like on the skills that I developed, right? Like as a youth pastor, you got to learn how to communicate. You got to learn how to organize events. You got to learn how to talk with parents and set expectations with volunteers. And so like you take that, you go into the digital marketing space, you take the SEO stuff, you take just a general knowledge of digital media, you take some writing stuff, take some operations stuff. Then you take that and you go into sales, you learn how to communicate, you learn how to cold call, you learn how to cold email, you learn how to open conversations, take a deal across the finish line, go over to Cintas, you learn how to sell a premium product versus just trying to save people time and money and sell on value, come over to Impact, learn how to teach and communicate at a really high level because you're around other people that are communicating at a really high level. Learn how to do some of the short form content stuff that I'm learning. Like the skills compound, and that would be one of the biggest things that I would say is, if you are in your 20s, go get the skills. Go get the skills. Figure out again who has them. How can you go get around that person and learn from them? Luckily for me, I was taught how to do the short form stuff by one of my best friends because he had them. But go figure out who has what you want to learn and go get it, because once you have it, it's not like you unlearn it, but instead it just continues to grow and compound. So that's another thing.
Yeah, dude, that's good. Like even your different jobs, they really have helped serve each other along the way, and you're just learning and learning and learning and learning. And so I'm excited to see where it leads you. I'm excited to see you double down where you are. Guys, Catching Made Simple, check him out on TikTok. You're going to want to be a catcher after you watch him. Anj, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Ham.